Hello everybody and welcome back. I am here with my November wrap-up today. It was not a bad month. I read 9 or 10 books according to Goodreads, and since my books are scattered, as you see, we're going to be going off of that because I don't remember half of the books. Alright, the first book I read was The Last of the Endlings by Katherine Applegate. This is a YA fantasy about a young creature called an endling whose family is killed and her species is being hunted to extinction. There's a lot of politics for a middle grade book, and I enjoyed it. It was just a fun, quick, easy read. I think it did a good job with the relationships in it, and I think it was appropriate for middle grade. Like I said, it was a fast, easy read, but I did enjoy it and I'm glad I picked it up. I think I gave that one a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to the audiobook of The War of the Worlds because in November, according to Audible, I read, or listened to rather, 60 hours of audiobooks driving back and forth between Grand Forks, North Dakota, and Rochester, Minnesota, and Duluth and Mora, because I was interviewing for a solid week, and then I got a job, so I had to come down here to find an apartment, and then I moved, and it was just a whole big mess. But anyway, so I listened to The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I gave it a 3 out of 5 because that was underwhelming. I think I read that one in 5th grade. All I remembered was tripod creatures come down, and I thought there was a tunnel with water in it, but if this was the book that we read, there's definitely no tunnel with water in it. There's just him realizing that they can't kill him in the water, or something like that. It clearly didn't make much of an impression on me. I can understand why it would be really interesting in the 1800s, and I can understand why people like it, but I didn't. So I gave it a 3. Then I read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This one was also on audiobook. It is a retelling of the Trojan War from the point of view of a Trojan woman who is taken captive by, which one? Achilles? Achilles. And basically is his slave, and it was odd, to say the least. It wasn't a bad book. I think it was a fun retelling from a point of view that wasn't Achilles or Hector or Helen, but it wasn't my cup of tea per se, so I gave it a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5 stars because it was well written and it was good. It just didn't blow me away. Next, for whatever reason, Goodreads has comic books, and I bought the first edition of Shuri, which you might be able to see. It's right on the edge on the other side of this, but I also got a free comic book with that from the company called War of the Realms Prelude. The War of the Realms Prelude was just kind of bleh, whatever. I just read it because it was there and it took 5 minutes. But the Shuri one was fun. I think the animation, or the illustration style, that's what it's called, illustration, was fantastic, and I look forward to reading the rest of the series, written by, oh my gosh, author's name is gone, but she wrote Binti and Phoenix Rising or something like that, but she definitely wrote Binti. Either way, that author, and I enjoyed the writing. This one just felt so much like a setup to me that it was kind of boring, so I gave it 3 out of 5. Then we go back to the audiobooks, and I listened to one of the Audible choices for the month, if you remember. Sometimes they have good ones, sometimes they don't. They didn't this month, so I listened to After Anatemka, which is a recording of a live event where the author reads portions of her book and then sings, because apparently it's related to somehow Fiddler on the Roof. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 because I think if you were there live, it would have been fantastic to hear these people sing. Man, they have some pipes on them. But as a recording, it felt disconnected, and I didn't like it all that much. Then I read Good and Mad by Rebecca Traister, which is one of 3 books for Emma Watson's Goodreads book club for the months of November and December. I don't have the other 2 yet because moving and hectic. So I got this one on audiobook and listened to it, and it's really good. Check out my Goodreads review because it's much more in-depth than I'm about to go into. But Good and Mad is a nonfiction, so nonfiction November, woohoo! And it talks about why women should be mad, how it's valid to be mad, and why our anger has been subdued and suppressed for so long. Because if we actually got angry and did something about it, we could rule the world, which is what we keep telling ourselves, but then we proceed to suppress it again. I think this was a fantastic book that looked at both history and modern anger and put it in terms that you understood. It was also read by the author, which I enjoyed because she put emphasis on the parts that she wanted to, which made it a much more personal experience. I gave that one a 5 out of 5. Then I read 1984 by George Orwell. I think I gave this one a 3.5 or a 4. It was a little bit of a terrifying book, and by a little bit, I mean very. 1984 is a classic about a faceless government that controls everything you do and changes history constantly, which petrified me, honestly, because at this point, if we've got alternate facts or whatever you want to call them, fake crap, lies fed to us by the government, we're not that far off from it. And with all of this dystopian stuff, I think maybe that's part of the reason I dislike it these days, is just that it feels too real. And I don't want to read about reality. I want to read about fun things with happy endings. But no choice there. Next, for the one readathon, I had a whole big TBR of 4 or 5 books, which I will link that video down below for you. And turns out I read one of the books on that TBR. I read Crooked Kingdom, which qualifies for Mordor definitely, and a couple of the other challenges, again, linked down below, by Lee Bardugo. Crooked Kingdom is the second in the Six of Crows duology. I read the Six of Crows, the first one, last year, and then finally got around to the second one this year. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was good, it was fun, it felt a little bit like it dragged for a while, just in different parts, so it wasn't my favorite, but it was still good and it was still action-packed and fun, and I liked watching the relationships grow. I also I read Girls of Paper and Fire by Kari-ng. I looked up how to pronounce her name, that's how you do it. This is a book set in a fantasy China, it sounds like, where every year or every 5, at some interval of time, the Demon King has 8 girls brought to him, and they're concubines for a year, and then they're pretty well off for the rest of their lives, but it's not their choice. This year there are 9 girls, and our main character obviously is number 9. There's a lot of politics in it. It was predictable in the plot as far as what happened at the end, totally called it, but I really did enjoy the romance, because it wasn't immediately clear just by how she described his smoldering gray eyes or whatever, because there's no male romance in this, and that's one of the challenges that this fulfilled. Oh, and there goes the contact. So don't mind me while I continue talking because my contact is freaking out. Anyway, the romance is not a male romance, it's a female-female romance, and I enjoyed the fact that it was a female-female romance because it went deeper than a lot of the stereotypical hetero romances. And don't get me wrong, I like a good hetero romance, but at this point, especially in YA, they're so stereotypical and predictable and corny, and it's painful, and I want to cry. So it was refreshing to have one that actually made me root for this couple, as opposed to want to kill them myself. And the last book I read was Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, which I listened to on audiobook in about a week because Grand Forks to Rochester is 5 hours, 40 minutes, or 6 hours depending on traffic and weather. So that was fun. That was also a good book. Pachinko is about a Korean family who ends up in Japan, and it starts in 1910-ish and goes until at least the 1970s. I don't remember the specific dates, but about that, and it follows basically 3 different generations of this same family. I thought it was fascinating to learn about Japanese culture and Korean culture in a way that one is sort of subsumed by the other. I don't know a lot about Asian history besides kind of the big points. I can sing you the Chinese dynasties, but that's about all I got. I know that the Russians and the Japanese fought, and that panicked Europe because the Japanese won and they didn't like that. I know that the Chinese and the Japanese fought all the time and kept trying to take over the Southeast Asia peninsula. Is that what it is? They kept trying to take over the rest of Asia, and that just ended horribly for everybody involved. But they did it anyway. But that's about the extent of it. So I enjoyed learning more about Asian history through a very different lens, especially for me because a lot of the books that I read are very European focused. Those are all of the books I read in November. Not as many as the last 3 months, but hey, I still read, what, 9, 10 books? I don't know, something like that. I'm not mad about it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Twitter, Goodreads down below, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.